All right. Curtis Fuller on trombone, leading off on Benny Golson's My Blues House. We'll hear from Benny Golson during the break and his quintet. Ray Bryant on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Art Blakey on drums. This is by the way, this is from his 1959 album, Golson's 1959 album, The Essential Benny Golson. This is Lead Stories. I'm Utrice Lead. We don't have we need about 3 extra days to get to the topics that I had outlined for today's discussion. But you know how it goes. We'll talk as much as we can, and whatever we don't get to today, we'll follow up with tomorrow. So, what is going on in the world? Well, we know that the president has, gone into his threatening mode. He is threatening now. He's threatening to do something to Mexico because, according to him, Mexico is responsible for all these migrants, tens of thousands of them, coming into the United States and threatening Americans. So the intention is to lean heavily on Mexico, which has nothing to do with this except that it is a transition point. The migrants coming into the United States via Mexico are coming from 3 particular states in Central America, and Mexico, according to Trump, Mexico's job is to turn them away. Mexico's job is to prevent them from coming any further. He doesn't care whether they stay in Mexico. In fact, he has actually said that Mexico, all these migrants coming in and trying to apply for refugee status in the United States, they ought to stay in Mexico. And in fact, his administration at the border in particular, they have been sending people back. There's a question as to whether that is legal or not, because they are applying or seeking to apply for refugee status. And they must have a port of entry at which to apply. So this is the tactic. If you cut off the route to the ports of entry, that's at the border, then nobody would be able to apply. They can't reach the points of entry at which they will apply. So a while ago, as you recall, Trump decided that he was going to cut off that avenue. Mexico is going to somehow have to accommodate all these tens of thousands of people suddenly swelling into Mexico, but being prevented from accessing the internationally recognized ports of entry where they can apply for refugee status. Trump has done that. Now he wants to close, he's threatening now to close entirely, close the borders down, shut the borders down. And he wants Mexico to become far more involved. He's not saying how, but to become far more involved in getting all these refugees, to turn them back, to turn them around, to get rid of this undulating groups of people coming in or looking to come into the United States. Now, this is a very serious problem. You don't want to trivialize it. It is a very serious problem. But it is a serious problem on several levels. On the first level, we have the question of what has been the role of the United States in creating these teeming masses that are leaving their countries and doing everything they could possibly do at the risk of their very lives to get into the United States. It's not that they wake up one morning and decide, this is a good day to just leave everything I have behind, everything I know behind, all the people I know behind, and just take this uncertain trip by foot through treacherous countries and treacherous lands to see if I could, be lucky enough to apply for refugee status under United Nations law. So the three states in particular that are being looked at are Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And in each one of these states, of course, nobody's paying attention to it, especially Trump. The United States has had a pretty sordid history of exploitation, of warfare, of oppression of these peoples in Central and South America. We talk about it all the time, they are seeing to their survival. And we have to understand that whether people agree with it or not, they are now seeing to their survival. Trump's threat, and it's not an idle threat, of closing down the border with Mexico now, what he's saying is he's shutting down the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of Mexicans, because the border is the port through which Mexicans do a lot of work and sell their produce to the United States and so forth. These are not illegal acts, but he's such a mean, nasty individual. He has no problem at all, wouldn't bat an eye. If there was any leadership at all in the Trump administration, this problem would have been among the first problems that they would have tried to do something about. But the Trump administration doesn't talk to anybody. And if they're talking to people, it's not to elicit some kind of cooperation, some ideas of how the region as a region could function and everybody would benefit. But no, it's he's a racist. So there's nothing, as far as this administration is concerned, there's nothing to talk about. Just do. And whatever the consequences, they just have to deal with them. Here's a great example of the utter and complete failure of leadership by the United States. And to some degree, by the Central and South American countries as well. Simply because the United States is not taking the initiative doesn't mean that you can't. And this should have been, and still should be, at the top of the list on a regional basis for discussion and for action. It is not anybody's fault. This is what they're trying, in the end, this is what it becomes, that it is every individual's fault that they can't make a living, that they are poor, that they are suffering. It's their fault. In any event, it's not our fault. We have nothing to do with that. So figure out how you're going to solve your problem. And if you don't figure it out fast enough, we'll create even more problems. We'll withdraw humanitarian aid that is used to keep you barely going, barely alive. This is what this administration is doing. And it is proving the point time and again that it fails on a moral level, which is one thing. There's not a moral administration. There's no use for morality. But it lacks vision, and it lacks an understanding of how a leading country ought to behave. On the flip side of the coin, the United States is behaving exactly the way it has behaved for hundreds of years. These countries exist simply for exploitation. We are coming to get what you have. We want your labor. We want your assets. We want everything that is useful and that has some kind of a monetary value. That's what we want. But we don't want to see you. We don't want you near us. We don't want you with us. We don't want you in our country. Although you should understand that we have and we reserve the right to be in your country under any circumstances at any time. This is considered American leadership. It has not solved one single problem in this hemisphere. Not one. It's created hundreds of problems, not solving one of them. And now these problems are compounding, and so you can't really tackle a problem because you have a bunch of interrelated problems. You can't just pick out one because they have ripple effects. And we have not seen, certainly not in my lifetime, we have not seen any indication of real intelligence and leadership in how you encourage a stabilization and self-sufficiency and all the things they talk about. How do you do that? The way they've chosen to solve these problems is to throw money at it, knowing that the money does not create anything. It does not create wealth. It does not create housing. It does not create jobs. These are palliatives so that people don't go stark raving mad in the streets and cause a problem. So they throw some money at these states which continue to deteriorate, as is predictable. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if you consistently exploit countries, you take everything that they have, you're not giving them the fair value of what these commodities are worth. Your relationship is totally predatory. There is no quid pro quo that is just and even. Not at all. But then you have somebody waking up in the middle of the night wondering what else he can do to use the suffering of people to make points for himself as to how tough he is. And this is exactly the approach. This is now called diplomacy. This is how the Trump administration conducts diplomacy. There is no record of success in elevating anything, in solving anything. And they don't intend to go that route. But you have countries that are suffering, these three in particular, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We have heard all these stories, I'm sure you've heard them too, about U.S. covert operations and the looting of these countries and the wars conducted, the internecine warfare. So this is a time when we ought to be challenging the Trump administration. What exactly do you intend? Well, we know what you intend. What do you intend to do to correct it? You're violating the heck out of international law. You're doing whatever the hell you want. And you're almost daring people to attack you. You're begging for somebody to start a war against you so that you would have then have the excuse of upping the ante and going nuclear. This is why we have to pay attention to these things. And as you know, we've discussed here our observation as to the mental state of the president, apt to do anything rash at any time that could cause tremendous negative fallout. And here's an example. Here's yet another example. And we have in Congress people sitting around trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do? We're going to wait and see if he does this for real. We're going to wait and see if he changes his mind. All these vapid, stupid excuses. And people are dying. People are literally dying. So we have to, and I keep saying this, and I'm almost tired of saying it, that the communities of interest, maybe they're tired too. This man has tuckered us all out. But we still have to fight. Because it is the right thing to do. It is the appropriate thing to do. It is the lawful thing to do. You can't just get up and say, well, I'm going to shut down the border. Well, that's what you say. That's not what the law says. Shutting down the border is not just shutting down the border. These are acts of violence that countries commit against each other. Acts of warfare. And it's not like, and I just want to say, let's understand really what your problem is, Mr. President. Your problem is that you are overcome, and as you have been for years, by the very thought of miscegenation. The purity of white blood in the United States is at stake. We have stories all the time about people flipping out because they're at a restaurant and they see something on the menu written in Spanish. We know what it's about. This has nothing to do with the law, international law. And if it does have something to do with international law, how is it that you personally and singularly select to punish Mexico? The Mexicans are not coming, not in these numbers. Your own administration has identified where the migrants, for the most part, are coming from. Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. You are not engaging with any of these countries. You're sticking it to Mexico because you think you can get away with it. And you can beat up on Mexico and any other Spanish-speaking country for that matter because you are confident that racists in the United States will support your action. I'm hoping that we can prove him wrong. And if there are countries in Central and South America that are afraid or unwilling or not at all interested in participating in helping to forge a way forward in the new century for their own region, we can't help you. If you're that afraid that you can't stand up and say, Mr. President, you're wrong, and we are not going to recognize your actions, nobody's taking legal action at the United Nations, nobody is in the streets in behalf of their own people. Trump has made it a crime, especially when it comes to black and brown people. He has made it a crime to be a refugee. Would this have been his attitude with Jews fleeing the oppression? Is it now? No. Would this have been his attitude with the Irish fleeing oppression and poverty? But he chooses this because he is pandering to the basest instincts of his political followers and his own internal resentment and fright that the refugees are darkening America, and it's got to be stopped. He can't say it that way because he's a coward, but we can absolutely, we can feel comfortable that that's the interpretation of his action. So let's watch this, because it is not a simple matter of our unstable president mouthing off again. There's something to this, and it could be very big indeed. So we really ought to monitor this. I don't know how you feel about it. We'll talk about it in a minute. But we really have to pay attention to it. I get so angry sometimes, and especially recently, I find myself slipping into a state of anger that surprises even me. I say, I'm not an angry person. Why am I walking around feeling so angry? And of course, we know why. These things work on your mind in ways that you could never imagine. These are not your feelings and thoughts, they are transferred onto you. And you're saddled with them. They don't go away. And then you try to figure out, well, what are you going to do? Because everybody else seems so okay with it. Everybody seems calm and well adjusted. Nobody seems particularly perturbed about anything. The attitude seems to be, oh, well, it will go away. Things will get better. I don't believe so. Well, come tomorrow in Chicago, however it turns out, there will be an African American female at the helm of the city. It will be history making. It will be quite an achievement on that level. and and then again, it won't be surprising. Why? Why am I saying these things? I'm saying these things because Jesse Jackson has shown up. And you know, every time you see Jesse Jackson involved in something, it's generally not good news for the people. Well, what has he done? Jesse Jackson made a big thing on, was it Saturday or Sunday? Yesterday, that the two candidates, well, one will be mayor by tomorrow, should sign something of an agreement to be civil to each other and to conduct themselves well and so forth. Oh, that is good. Great. I find it interesting that this approach was not taken before in any other candidate, any other campaign involving men, black men, white men, Latino men. You don't have to have them agree, you know, but it was an entree. It was an entry point for Jackson to be seen as, you know, he's been resurrected, I guess, politically, and he intends to be present. Because you see, these women aren't quite capable by themselves. They need instruction and guidance. They don't have what it takes to figure things out themselves. So he comes on the scene and he encourages them, let me put it that way, to sign this agreement between themselves, which is to me so horrendous. Even if he felt that this was needed, it didn't have to be public. You know these women. If you need to, go to some kind of a quiet place and say, listen, why don't you guys do a better job of, you know, getting along for the sake of the city and whatever. But no, there is this big to-do with Jesse Jackson basically as the conductor of affairs. He's telling two grown women what to do. And I have to say, very disappointingly, they agreed to do it. It's probably more out of a sense of respect, but he's not showing respect when he does that. It's one of those, you know, passive-aggressive moves where he advises, but really what he is doing is telling you what to do, and he's telling you what to do because he needs a comeback really bad. Really badly, he needs one. And he believes, clearly, that this is where he's going to relaunch himself. So you will see the likes of Jackson and the Jacksonites and the Clintons and the Clintonites surfacing once more in Chicago. At least that will be their intention. It is my hope that Chicagoans, being as sophisticated as they are, would run them out of Dodge. They're circling already. What can I get? How could I entrench myself? This has nothing to do with history and black women making history and the changing of the guard in Chicago and high hopes for the city under either one's guidance. No, they are muscling in, and this is how Jackson does it. Jesse Jackson will come to your town and for the right price will absolutely destroy your revolution that you're trying to make. So I saw that and I go, oh my God. I mean, give it a rest. Give it a rest. If you feel the need to counsel people and advise them as to what to do, we don't need to see it. And for their sakes, it should be quiet. Go someplace where people can't see you and talk all you want. But I see already that the flares have been sent up. Jackson is in town, and the news people reported him as being the head of the Rainbow Coalition, which we, of course, have discussed here. I would like to see proof of it. What now is the Rainbow Coalition? Where does it operate out of? What is it doing? Is Jackson still the head of the National Rainbow Coalition? And this is the trouble we have. You see, we could see trouble coming down the pike a long distance away, but we won't do anything about it. This is the time to remind Jesse that, yes, some people love him and so forth, but it would be a great idea if he were to leave, whoever wins the election, leave it to that person to decide what help she needs. We did not elect you, that's for sure. Chicagoans did not elect Jesse Jackson. And he should understand how insulting and sexist it is that before this lady even sits behind her desk, there is this man proposing to help her run things because she may not know what to do. She's a greenhorn. She needs guidance. You know, people give themselves away so quickly, so easily. And then you wonder why, on the flip side of that coin, people don't react to them as swiftly and as easily. Swat them away like flies. I'll call you if and when I need you. I'll call you. I'm so thankful for your interest in my success. But go away. And it sounds harsh, but we've been through these cycles many, many times before. And it is being marketed, because that's what it is, marketing. It's being marketed as, here is a brother who will be there with his sister, you know, pulling her through the rough times and showing her and, you know, teaching her. I'm so sick of that paternalism. It's not even funny. And that's what you get. That's what you get when you're dealing with people like Jesse Jackson. He is clearly sending a signal, or he has sent a signal, that he wants back in. He comes out of the Chicago machine, and everybody understands what that means. The Clintons understand it. Obama understands it. They come out of that machine. And now, no matter who wins tomorrow, with this piece of history being made, everybody is happy, of course, and would be, proud. But that's not the history of the machine people. The machine people are only interested in what can they get from you? What can you do for me? And I guarantee you, before long, in the blink of an eye, you'll see hints that the old machine wants back in. You think I'm kidding, but it's true. That's what's going to happen. So Jesse Jackson emerges once again as a power broker. And he is telling people, no, the wrong word, he's advising people what to do. And they're very happy for his advice. Meanwhile, all kinds of deals, backroom deals, are going to be going on. So I'm hoping whoever wins tomorrow understands this. This is what comes with winning in Chicago. You have people who have spent their entire lives making deals, making money, making deals. Of course, the champion here would be the Clintons. They've made more money than anybody else could have possibly made in that time. Look, let me take a break now. I haven't finished all of my subjects that I wanted to touch on, but let's not overcrowd the field. We'll take a break and then come back and talk some more right after this. You're listening to Lead Stories on PRN.FM. It's so far, we're talking about issues of the day. We're talking about Trump and his designs on Mexico, ramping up his hostilities toward Mexico, supposedly in the name of curtailing immigration and particularly refugees. We're talking also about what's about to happen tomorrow in Chicago. And we're seeing people having eyes on that prize already. 888-874-4888 is the number to call. 888-874-4888. Your reaction, Jay, from New York. You're on the air.
How are you, Yatrice? How was your weekend? And I hope you had some lentil soup to make it an even better weekend.
Oh, lentil is Thursday.
Okay.
It's already planned.
Listen, let me go back to you how far I go in regards to the shenanigans of Jesse Jackson. I was a member back in the day, and I think this is when I first met you, with the group called Anissa, with Sister Soldier back in the day. And during the end of the existence of the group, Sister Soldier got into that flare-up with Bill Clinton. And let me tell you, Jesse Jackson and all of the so-called black leadership got together and told her that they would take care of it, that for her not to respond. Now, let me tell you something, Utrice. I think I was 20-something years old, young 20s, and oh, man, it was the best part of my life, man. To be around Sister Soldier to this day, it brings joy and happiness and a smile to my face. You know, to have been around her, to have met her, to have known her, to have looked at her growth and to see who she really was. And in that situation, Jesse and Farrakhan, Sharpton, Butts, and all of them told her, we going to take care of it. And for Sister to not say anything, to don't reply, to let it go. I tell you this from the bottom of my heart. I prayed every night that she would reply to Clinton, that she would address him, that she would deal with it in the fashion to what is it would to move black people to a level that Jesse Jackson and the rest of them would have never took us to. That's just my opinion. But what they did was they basically capitulated and sold themselves out to, as history would show, to someone that has never been good to the black community. And that right there made me so angry and bitter that it turned me off, to be honest with you, to being involved in organizations, being a part of certain movements, and like being on the outside but observing what is going on. And
but we can't get bitter. We can get bitter for about five minutes. Now. Is all you could afford.
And you know something, Utrice?
You can't
I
allow.
was bitter for a long time.
Kind of thing that destroys it. You take these things in, and without you being conscious of it, it actually eats at you on the inside. And it doesn't even bother these people. They're going about their business.
And you know something, Utrice? It absolutely did. It turned me off. It made me go in a different direction. And, to this day, I'll come to accept it. But when I look at Jesse Jackson and I look at Farrakhan and I look at the rest of them, I have nothing in my heart of goodness really for them, because I know what they really did to hurt the progress of our people. But lastly, your first comment, you were talking about Trump. And I know you're about to get on me bad when I say this, but I have to say it. Trump is doing what he feels is best for America. Because in his eyes, this is a white man's country that is about to be overtaken by minorities. And him and his cronies and the people in his administration are going to try and do everything in their power to put a stop to it. Now, in the process, a lot of people are going to get hurt. And if you notice anything about Trump, he doesn't care about everyday people, those which are really his members who support him. He only cares about the rich. But messing with Mexico is going to cause a lot of economic problems for this country. I'll use this as a perfect example. Watch what happens to the price of my beloved avocados.
Well, I was reading about that today. But, we have given him wide berth just the same. And I must say that when contrasted with countries like France, like Greece, where people go into the streets when things are done wrong, the United States, at least up until now, people don't seem to have a sense of grievous harm being done to them. They're mildly irritated.
Because they can't. But, you can't have grievous harm. You can't have grievous harm to yourself and understanding, you trees, if you're trying to feed yourself and feed your family and keep a roof over your head. Why do you think people are not out in the streets? Because they can't afford to take off from work. They can't afford to
I understand
protest.
all of
They
that,
can't
but
afford to do that.
at the same time, you have to deal with the question: to what degree are you responsible via inaction for the difficulties that we're experiencing?
You're totally responsible.
By doing nothing, you're not solving your problem.
Right, and I agree with you. We are responsible for not getting out in the street and fighting and doing the necessary thing. But for some reason in our minds, we don't have the desire or the fight to stand up to a bully like Trump. You know what I mean? We expect people in the media to do it.
We overestimate
people in the media. They expect to do it. You know, not the everyday people. They're looking for Rachel Maddow to do it.
He's a bully because people say so, and because by doing nothing, they validate that he's a bully and that he's winning as a bully. But one experience I've had, and I've had several experiences, but it's important when you're being bullied, no matter what the correct thing to do is, you'll have to stand up for yourself and fight. And you'll have to, if not for yourself, you have children, you have neighbors, you have friends who are adversely affected, you fight for them too. And maybe that's what we need. We need something to bring us so low to the point where we have no choice but to face the facts that we are in the grips of a bully. And beyond that, that we don't deserve this. This is not what being an American stands for. This is not what we sign up for. And we ought to do something about it. Thanks, Jay, for getting us started today. Henry from Chicago. You're getting ready to vote tomorrow, huh?
How's it going, you trees?
Okay.
Well,
so what's the calamity happening in Chicago?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, you say Chicago, I'll try to call. But, you know, the Jesse Jackson thing is an interesting element that you bring up because it shows that these two candidates, Lori Lightfoot and Toni Preckwinkle, they're not really understanding the needs of the black community. One of the things that's happening here is they are trying, both of them are trying to muster the black vote and to kind of rally them to, you know, to get out and vote because it's interesting, in the primaries, the black population here in Chicago didn't vote for either one of these candidates. So they're actually trying. I mean, I've never seen, because they have been campaigning on both the south and west sides, where it's predominantly African American, more than I've seen a mayor do since I'm thinking Harold Washington. So they're really trying and to try to get, you know, Jesse Jackson to step in. You know, it's like, you know, most of the black Chicago here really, you know, we really don't care about Jesse Jackson anymore. I mean, I think majority of us feel the same way you do in regards to, you know, just go away and retire. But, you know, another thing, too, is that I think Jackson is kind of making up for what was supposed to be. Now, his son, who was indicted on corruption charges a couple of years ago, this was supposed to be his mayoral run right now.
And daughter-in-law.
Yeah, and until they got caught up in the scandal, because everybody about, you know, 5-7 years ago would have thought that he would have been running for mayor now, and he probably would have won. But I think he's kind of making up that lost ground for that. So it's sort of like, you know, I don't know, you know, he's putting his, you know, nose into it because, you know, his son failed to, you know, become the mayor of Chicago like, you know, everybody had predicted he would probably be. So I think that's why he's kind of putting himself in the spotlight now.
Well, I have a different take. The Clintons really disappointed a whole bunch of people. Even though, of course, they moved primarily in their own self-interest and nobody else's. But there was a whole cast of characters who supported the Clintons on the premise that they'll be taken care of. They would have an inside into whatever administration the Clintons would eventually set up, and they would prosper and flourish. Didn't happen that way. And by the way, I'm going to tell you that it is not going to happen where the Clintons are concerned. They're about ready to get buried by tons of rocks. They're ducking and bobbing and weaving, trying to lose themselves because there's so much stuff that's going to be happening against them very soon. But you always find that it is useful, even if you don't yourself get a seat. The main thing is influence, to have influence, because you could monetize that as well. And Jackson loves money. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't surprise me if he thought of an idea that, you become a consultant. You set up a consultancy where you pay me to tell you where to go or to help you get whatever contract you want and so forth. This is how Chicago politics works, just like New York politics. Yeah. But it was mind-boggling to me that these two women, at least the first thing I thought about is that they, considered themselves powerful people, and they settled in their own skin with that idea that they would allow Jesse Jackson to come in with this idea that after the election, they need to sit down and talk things out. What kind of nonsense is that?
Well, like you said, Jackson is trying to, play himself back into the game as a power broker. And it's, it's a feeble, like I said, I think it's a kind of like a feeble attempt of these two candidates to try to, garner the black votes, and not knowing that, most of Black Chicago really doesn't care about Jackson. And also, too, both of these candidates are still tied into the machine, even though they'll tell you that they're not. Preckwinkle obviously got support from federally charged Alderman Ed Burke and his crew, and Lori Lightfoot is backed by the Daily. So, it's the machine without the face. It's a machine with two black faces in it.
It's machine by proxy, right?
Exactly.
So what are you going to do tomorrow?
I'm gonna go to work, and I'm gonna contemplate on voting.
Okay, you're going to contemplate. Well, at least that is something definitive. If I were in Chicago, I don't know what I would do. I know what I would want to do, but I don't know what I would do. Same as if I were in New York, I don't know what I would do, because it is so disappointing what these people have done to, the cities that they once were so powerful in and could have done so much to change and uplift people and give them a happier life. And it's not that people want all these things. They just want, a decent job, a good place to live, and schools for their children.
Exactly.
But you have this thing has got to stop, and it's on both sides of the aisle. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, right, Henry, and good luck with your decision tomorrow. I guess you'll fill us in as to how things went.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Tony from Orlando, you have only a few minutes, but you still have a few minutes.
Hi, Idris.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I think that Trump alienating these countries in the Americas is only going to be good news for the socialist movement. Because if these people in these other countries can't depend on the United States as an equal partner in the Americas, it's only going to create a vacuum for countries like Russia and China to come in and assist them financially.
Okay. And is that a bad thing or is that a good thing as you see it?
It's a good thing if you're for the socialist movement, and it's a bad thing if you're not. It's just that simple. I mean, he's just creating a vacuum.
What do people mean? What do you mean?
Countries.
What do you understand the socialist movement to be?
In the grand scheme of things, anti-imperialist.
Is that it?
That's it. In the world, you have the imperialist, which is the United States leading the charge, and anything other than that is pretty much fighting against it. They control everything. They control the money. They control pretty much how everything runs in the world. But we're seeing that a coalition is being formed to fight against it. And by the United States, their actions in the Americas, instead of creating a union and partnering with these countries, they're doing the total opposite. They're pushing them away. And where else are they going to go?
Well, we will continue this tomorrow. Please make it a point to call in because you said something here that really is important to pursue. Dig a little deeper into it because I hear people using this term all the time about socialism, and I'm not so sure that we're on the same page when it comes to the definition. So you could help us with that. Thanks for calling in. This is the end of our program today. Let's tune in again with each other tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye.